Okay, so my name's Alan Gardner. I'll be teaching the program. I've been with Dr. Yanis. Well, I guess I've known him for about 6 years. In fact, we used to teach together in United Arab Emirates for another school. He used to teach project management. I used to teach human resource management, strategic management, leadership. And so I've known him for a number of years. And I've been working here in Saudi now, I guess, for 2 or 3 years. So I make this trip average of once a month. This month I've been here, I'll be here 3 times. But usually I average out about once a month. So welcome everyone. During the course of the class, if you have a question, please feel free to ask. You're not interrupting me if you have a question. I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. If I can't answer your question, I'll get back to you with an answer. But usually I can. I've been doing this enough years, so I can usually answer your questions. A little bit about me. I got my master's degree fairly late in life. I was probably in my mid-50s when I got my master's degree. I was a late bloomer. So my master's in human resource management, particularly because I wanted to teach it. I have a number of different certifications in human resource management. I also have a chartered MCIPD, SHRM membership, Australian membership, and a variety of other things under my belt. But I've been doing this for about 40 years, despite my young age. But I've been in senior management, a lot of international management. I worked for Tyco International, and I had responsibility for operations in North America, Canada, Mexico, some in the UK. So I've been in management my entire career, mostly manufacturing. I spent a short stint of 1 year in the U.S. government sector because I always wondered what it was like to work in anybody work in the government? No? Yeah, good for you. I spent 1 year in the government and I said, I can't handle this. I had to go back to the private sector. I prefer working for private sector and typically for-profit organizations. It's just a little bit more efficient and streamlined. Whereas working in the government sector sometimes gets a little sluggish and things don't move as fast in the government, at least in the U.S. government. I came to Abu Dhabi in 2008, and actually I never went back to the United States. So I've been over here going on 11 years and spent 10 years in Abu Dhabi. And I worked for Abu Dhabi government. I did consulting work. And eventually I moved from the consulting into just teaching and training. And that's pretty much what I've been doing now for the last 7, 8 years, all over the Middle East. And I moved out of Abu Dhabi in December of 2017, and I built my semi-retirement home in the Philippines. So I'm a world traveler. Okay, anybody ever been to the Philippines? Beautiful. Have you?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Especially in the Boracay Island.
In Boracay, yeah. The tourist trap. Yeah, I built my house in Cebu, and I've been very happy there. So I've been there just a little over a year now. And so it's a long trip for me to come here. It's an hour flight from Cebu to Manila, 9 hours to Abu Dhabi, hour and a half here. So you add it up, and then you got all the layovers in between. So it's tough. It's a tough trip. So right now, I'm considered an expert HR trainer because I've been doing it my whole career throughout the EMEA region. Adjunct faculty member. And adjunct faculty member just means you're a part-time faculty member. That's all that really means. It's a fancy term for part-time. But I specialize primarily in MBA programs, HR management, strategic planning, leadership, and organizational behavior. So when you guys take also you'll take a team course. I'll be doing that one as well. So any questions so far? Everybody feels confident I can do this course? Strategic management, even though most of my career has been in HR management, I spent a lot of my HR management in strategic management. I really enjoy strategic management. I probably enjoy strategic management more than HR management course. But we're going to look at strategy as a whole, and it really doesn't matter whether you're a very small organization or a very large organization. I mean, even if you own a donut shop in Dammam, would you still have a strategy? What do you think? Yeah, of course. Because what's strategy all about? Strategy is basically your plan as to how you're going to compete. And if you have other donut shops in Dammam, you'd have to have a strategy how you're going to compete against other donut shops, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're a small organization or a major multinational corporation, you're going to have a strategy. So that's a little bit about me. Originally, I'm from the U.S. That's why they put that little flag up there. So, we'll be here, just some ground rules. We'll be here till, you have to excuse me, I'm just getting over 2 weeks of bronchitis, so if you see me gasping a little bit for breath, it's because it's still, I'm not contagious, but it's still in my lungs. So if you see me gasping for breath, it's because I'm having a real difficult time breathing. And that was from my trip to Riyadh. I was in Riyadh 2 weeks ago. I always get sick when I travel, so there's always people infected. Don't you love when you're sitting on a plane and somebody behind you is coughing and you're like, oh, you just want to cover your face? That always happens to me, and I'm very susceptible to bronchitis. It's because of surgery I had years ago. So we're going to look at some basic concepts. This course will go till, I'm going to try to finish by about 9 o'clock tonight. Does that make sense? What? 9 o'clock? Yeah, 9. What time did you think?
I saw 7 o'clock.
7? No. Originally this class, I'll be honest with you, the last time I did this class 3 weeks ago in Riyadh. We went from 1 o'clock till 10 o'clock. It was a 9-hour program. So this one we're doing from 1 to 9. Somewhere around 8:30, we won't be doing slides, and we'll be talking about your group project that you're going to do for tomorrow. Basically, what I do is I ask people to do a small piece of the group project, like 3, 4, 5 slides, and do a presentation tomorrow. You can prepare them either, after class is late, but you can do it tomorrow morning. You can do it in teams of 2 if you want. And the actual group project doesn't have to be handed in, of course, till the end of the 30-day period. But for tomorrow, you might, if you can do maybe 3, 4 slides, only to give everybody some public speaking experience. Because a lot of people don't get experience doing public speaking, doing a presentation, okay? So, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. We'll probably start that like around, 8:15, 8:30. Unless I'm falling flat on my back, we may start earlier. So I'll see how long my breath holds out. And tomorrow, we'll do the same thing. We'll probably quit like around 8:15, 8:30, and then we'll go over the final assignment that you guys will be doing. It's basically like a research paper. Anybody ever do a research paper? Yes? No? Okay. We'll go over that. So, we have 3 prayer times today. I have 3:14, 5:52, and 7:22. Somebody has to be my prayer keeper. Who's going to remind me when it's prayer time? Okay, you're elected. In case I forget, because sometimes if I'm involved in something, I go past. But I wrote them down, so I'll try to remember. And usually what I do is we take a prayer break. We usually take 10 minutes for prayer, and then another 10 minutes for coffee break. So usually I make them about 20 minutes, because everybody needs at least a 20-minute break to get out of here for a while and stretch your legs and get some coffee. If you want to get coffee during the presentation, you're not interrupting me. The only thing you have to be careful of is they're filming. So you want to kind of go out the back way, if you can squeeze around the camera on this side. But I have, you're not bothering me if you want coffee or tea or something. So, I think that's about it for the rules. We'll go over your workbook. That's the skinny one. There are assignments in that workbook. All of the assignments in that workbook you will find in these slides. So it's not difficult to do. Typically when I go through the slides, I'll tell you, by the way, this is in your workbook, okay? So you might want to make a little mark on that slide if you're following the slides. But everything in that workbook is in the slides. Does that make sense? Huh? Yes. I built this course. It took me about 3 weeks to put this thing together. But I try to make it easy and so it flows a little better and you don't have to go all over for different information. So, but all of the workbook exercises are in the slides, so you shouldn't have any problem. There's some diagrams in there and things. You know, they have I think there's multiple choice questions, there's a couple of short case studies in there. There's fill in the blanks, that kind of stuff. But all of it is in the slide presentation, so there's nothing in there you can't find in the slides. So, anybody ever hear the term VUCA world, V-U-C-A? Uh-huh. Everybody's making a face. No, I never heard of that. How do we survive in a VUCA world? And why do we call it a VUCA world? Because today's world, because of globalization particularly, is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So we call it a VUCA world. And one of the things that helps us survive and gain some stability is a combination of management, of course, and strategy. Okay, this is how we survive in a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Okay, so strategy plays a great deal of play in this process. And when you think of strategy, always think of looking ahead. Okay, strategy is looking out. Okay, that's strategy. Anything that is planning for the future is strategic in nature. Does that make sense? You have the now and you have later. Okay, and you'll see that kind of follows through in this program. So what is it? And I kind of like this. Strategy is about winning. Who are you winning? What are you winning against? Exactly. Your competitors. You win, they lose. So it's a very short statement. Strategy is about winning. And this was written by Robert Grant. Robert Grant wrote it as a textbook, Contemporary Strategy Analysis. It's kind of used in universities all over the world, really. It's a very popular textbook. In fact, we used to use it in Abu Dhabi and Dubai when I taught there, and Sharjah and Ras Al Khaimah. So strategy is not a detailed plan or a program of instructions. It's a unifying theme that gives coherence and direction to the actions and decisions of an individual or organization. Anybody ever hear Michael Porter? Anybody ever have a marketing class? Yes? No? Okay. Michael Porter is kind of known for marketing. And I think he's still teaching, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's still alive, but I think he's still teaching. He also talks about strategy, and he says it's about competitive position, differentiating yourself in the eyes of your customer, adding value through a mix of activities different from those used by your competitors. So the word differentiation, what's the root word in the word differentiation or differentiating? What's the root word? Different. How do we make our product or our service different? Exactly. Very good. Yeah, it's unique. It's uniqueness. What can we build into our product or service that makes it unique from our competitor's product or service? That's called differentiation. Okay, that is one of Michael Porter's main strategies, and we'll see that later. Okay, everybody with me so far? Okay. Henry Mintzberg. You'll probably see his name pop up in a number of different MBA classes. Strategy is a plan. It's a how, a means of getting from here to there. Okay? Strategy is perspective, meaning vision and direction. So if we think of this, we think of strategic planning. You'll see this again in your workbook as well. Strategic planning is an organizational management activity used to set priorities, focus energy and your resources, strengthen operations, ensure that employees and other stakeholders are working toward common goals, establish agreement around intended outcomes, results, and assess and adjust the organization's direction in response to a changing environment. So you're focusing your energy and your resources. Now, we're going to see that word resources a number of times. When I was a human resource director, I used to have managers come into my office complaining, and they'd kind of whine. They'd say, "Oh, I got this big assignment from my boss, and I don't have the resources to do it." What does that mean? I used to say, well, what resources don't you have? There are 4 types of resources. Anybody want to try, guess what they are? Maybe you know. Yeah, human. So people, that's the easy one. People are a resource. What else?
Money.
Yeah, what do we call that in a financial?
Finance.
Exactly, good. Budget, yeah. That's a very important resource. So if you don't have the budget to get a project done, it ain't gonna get done. What else?
Time frame.
Yeah. Time frame and other things.
Know-how. Operations.
Operations. Well, think of it. You get a,
Experience.
well, who said that? Materials. Physical assets kind of groups everything together. That can be time, that can be desks, chairs, computers, whatever. Okay? If you don't have the physical assets to do a particular assignment, then you're lacking resources. So you have people, budget, physical assets. What's the last one? The last one's the hardest one. No?
Time frame.
No. Think of, we have any engineers in here? Oh, whoa! I'm overwhelmed. You get an engineering project to do. You have to do all this big design work, but you're lacking a particular resource. What could it be?
The know-how. Technical.
Technology. Exactly. What if you don't have this? What if you don't have the electronic software to do it? What if you don't have the design software? Okay. Does that make your job easier? Ooh. I'm going to get killed. I'm going to kill on this door. I see it coming. It's not a good setup. So, technology. So, people, budget, physical assets, technology. Why am I spending time on this? Because we're going to see this word, resources, throughout the program. And rather than have to explain it later, and it'll come up later, but just so you know what we're talking about. When we say resources, so, and why is that attached to strategy? Because if you're going to have a strategic plan, you have to dedicate the resources to make it successful. If you're going to have a strategic plan and then you're going to cheap out on the resources, is your plan going to be successful? No. You can't starve your people from you can't starve your management from people. You can't starve your department from budget, physical assets, or technology, and expect your strategy to be implemented. Okay? So you have to dedicate the resources. That's the first rule of strategy implementation, dedicating the resources. Okay? Does that make sense? So I thought I'd cover it now. So strategic planning is a disciplined effort that produces fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, who the organization serves, what it does, why it does it, with a focus on the future. Everything is future with strategy. So effective strategic planning articulates not only where an organization is going and the actions needed to make it progress, but also how it will know if it's successful. And how do you know if your strategy is successful? Yeah. KPIs, measurements, metrics. Okay? You have to have something to measure to see if the strategy is successful or if it's on track. And typically when a company sets up long-term strategies, or even short-term strategies, annual strategies, they typically develop KPIs, so every few months they have a check to see, is this strategy taking us where we want to go? Okay? And those KPIs have to be accurate and they have to be relevant. So, this I know is in your workbook. It's a common strategic plan theme. If you can understand this slide, we can probably all go home now after this. This, he's making, really? Can we go? This is the essence of strategic planning. So when an organization is developing a strategy, the first thing they have to look at is where we have been as a company, where we were, where we've been the past year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Where were we as a company? Next one, of course, is where are we right now today as a company? The third thing, where do we want to go as a company? And lastly, once we know where we want to go, how do we get there? So basically, when we look back, we do that through trend analysis. Everybody familiar with trend analysis? Anybody in sales? Hey, I got a sales guy, a couple sales guys? Good. If you're doing sales forecasting, what is a sales forecast? It's a prediction, right? This is where our sales will be next year, the year after that. Now, you have two ways of determining your sales forecast. The easy way, of course, is if you have a crystal ball, and you can look in your crystal ball. Oh, yes, I see our sales next year. Okay, that makes it easy, but most people don't have crystal balls. So the only other way to do it is to go back in time. What has the trend been for the past 3 years? And once you establish the trend, you can come up with a fairly accurate prediction of where it will be in the future. Does that make sense? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? So trend analysis tells a company where they have been. It doesn't matter, even if you're in human resources and you're predicting headcount, you look at where your headcount's been versus where it's going to be. So where are we right now as an organization? And we use a mission statement for that. Anybody familiar with a mission statement? Who can tell me what a mission statement is? Don't be shy.
It is the goal, or where's the company going to be there?
No, it's where the company is right now. Good.
This is a supplement coming from the vision of the company, stating the tangible target that the company is setting.
Well, that's where we want to go. Vision. So the mission statement describes the company as it exists today. If you took a snapshot in time, this is our company today. Where we want to go as a company is our vision. And how do we get there? Strategic plan. So if this is where I am right now, this is where I've been, this is where I am right now, and I want to go over here, the strategic plan is the roadmap of how I'm going to get over there. Simple?
But if this is for the established already exist, right? If you have something from the scratch, shall we call it a strategic plan?
Sure.
But we'll
Oh, you mean like a startup company?
yeah, start.
No, a startup company would be a little different because you don't have trend analysis. So a startup company, of course, would probably be working more on their vision rather than trend analysis and mission. It would be a little different. But in general, for established organizations, and it doesn't matter whether you're profit, nonprofit, big, small, or medium. It doesn't really make any difference. It's the same process. So the strategic plan basically is your long-term strategy. Long-term strategy is typically 2 to 5 years. Now, if you go back, I don't know, 15, 20 years, long-term strategy used to be 5 to 10 years. But all of you are probably too young to remember that. But it used to be 5 to 10 years. What changed? Why isn't it 5 to 10 years anymore?
Technology?
Well, because we live in a VUCA world. Exactly right. You can't have long-term strategy in a 5 to 10 year period anymore because things are changing too rapidly. The economy, for one, okay? Technology is changing constantly. So typically companies are moving into the 2 to 5 year time period for their long-term strategy. So companies have long-term strategy, and then yearly they have what they call short-term or annual strategy that they pull down from that. And long-term strategy is more flexible. Maybe the word we use is vague, where short-term strategy becomes much more defined because that's the strategy you're going to use for this year. So you have strategy for 2019, 20, 21, 22, and 23. And you add them all up, it becomes your long-term strategy. But they become more defined each year. And typically that strategy is rolled out, usually in the beginning of the year. And we'll talk about that later. Everybody got that? Simple enough? You feel confident now? No?
I cannot swallow this mission
No.
I cannot run. Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, I'm gonna show you examples that will elaborate on it. Yeah, I think you're looking at mission like a space program mission.
Maybe.
The mission is the future plan.
At least the
But see, in a strategic process, mission is basically where the company is today.
yeah, you are destroying my belief system. That's why.
Oh, I don't want to destroy your belief system.
Yeah, you are. So now I have the vision, which is the company where we are heading, and the mission is coming from this vision. And this is as far as I understand. The mission is the
No, it's the other way around.
okay. So which is
The vision comes from the mission. This is where I am right now, but this is where I want to be in 2 to 5 years.
so you are putting the mission before the
Yes.
vision?
Yes, in a strategic plan you would.
Okay.
But the mission is not what I need to do.
No,
Arrive my-
the mission is where you are right now. It's called a mission statement.
What you are doing right now?
What you're doing right now.
Okay.
That's your mission.
For me, now. Okay.
Now I'm starting to break through that, right?
Okay.
Okay.
As an example for what we are doing right now, this company already established right now. Okay, if we say about the new company that we need to establish, and you have a vision to be, for example, a market leader. Take an example of Arista, okay? Just an example. I cannot use this because it's required to have the trend analysis. I take the benchmark of what the Aristans, what they are doing, to start to build the strategy to catch that vision.
Hmm.
Is this the way can we use it
You can.
for the start?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like startup companies, you know, this is a little bit more flexible. What I'm showing you is basically the standard for established organizations. I mean, excuse me, there are other components that would apply, of course, if it's a new company because you don't have any history.
We can use the market trend.
Sure. Market trend, yeah, absolutely. Because if your strategy is to increase your global market share, then the trend is where's our market share been, where is it now, and where do we want it to be? See, I mean, it can be from an HR perspective, it can be headcount. From a marketing perspective, it can be market share, and so on. Got it? Okay. So the process, you will also see this in your workbook. Phase 1. You do an environmental scan and assessment. What does that mean? Anybody familiar with a SWOT analysis? So internally, you look at your strengths and weaknesses. Externally, you look at the opportunities and threats. Now, SWOT analysis can be done departmentally. It can be done divisionally, or it can be done across the whole organization. Okay, but typically, a SWOT analysis starts to show. Now, typically, if you have a strategic management team and they're getting ready to basically come up with your 2 to 5 year plan and your annual short-term plan, this is what they do. They look at a SWOT analysis, and then they go in a little deeper with a PESTEL analysis. Anybody familiar with a PESTEL? If you're not, that's okay, because we're going to spend some time on it. The PESTEL analysis particularly looks at external factors. Okay? Doesn't really look at internal factors. Looks at more external factors. PESTEL means political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. So if you're looking to expand your business into another country, you would have to do a PESTEL analysis to consider whether that's a smart move or not, if that's your strategy. Okay. So
So to summarize it that way, SWOT is the internal analysis.
well, it's internal and external, because the OT of SWOT is opportunity and threats. That's external. But it's kind of a cursory examination, whereas a PESTEL analysis goes much deeper. And we'll show it. I'm going to show it. So I don't leave you hanging here, okay? So once that's done, you move to phase 2, which is strategy formulation or creation. So here, of course, this is where you define your vision and mission. You create long-term strategy. and you establish what your strategic goals are going to be. And of course, once you do that, you also have to set up KPIs so you know what to measure. Phase 3 is rolling that strategy out into your organization. They call it implementation and execution. So, here you establish your short-term goals, your action plans, you allocate the resources, what we talked about, and now you have to also communicate and motivate employees. Because strategy implementation is no different than a change initiative. And we all know that employees love change, right? No, they hate it. That's exactly right. So you know when you implement and execute your strategy, depending on how well you communicated it first, will determine how much resistance you get. Okay? So phase 3 is typically the most difficult part of the strategic planning process. And once you roll it out as annual goals, then of course you have to evaluate what you're doing and work towards sustaining what you're doing. So you review and refine your strategy, measure performance, take whatever corrective action is necessary. So we use the KPIs that we devise here. This is where we're using them to evaluate the strategy. And what do we need to do to get it back on track? Okay.
Corrective action.
Yeah, getting it back on track.
Why is it phase 4?
Well, evaluating the strategy would always be the last phase, the last step. So first you do your assessment, then you create your strategy, then you roll it out, and then you evaluate whether it's on track.
It's not by the end of the period of this.
No, this is done on a continuing basis. Typically, if you're looking at long-term strategy, you're probably doing this, I don't know, quarterly, at least.
Will we understand the difference between the strategic goals and the vision?
Yeah, because the strategic goals are what you need to do to make that map to get to where you want to go. In other words, so your strategic goal is to, let's say your strategic goal in the next 2 to 5 years is to increase market share by 20%. That's a strategic goal. Okay, fine. How are we going to do that? That's the strategic plan.
Okay. Strategic goal and vision.
Yeah.
I'm there. So
You're,
I don't know the difference in two terminologies. I cannot comprehend the difference between the vision and the strategic goals.
well, the vision is basically where you want the company to be in the next 2 to 5 years. Okay, and that can be a lot of different things. That can be in marketing, that can be in HR, that can be in, I don't know, technology and so on and so forth. Okay, the strategic goals are the finite things you're going to do to get there. Okay, in other words, like I said, if my vision is to increase market share, the strategic goal is to do it by 20%. Got it? Okay.
Milestones, we can say? The milestones? Is it?
It could be milestones. Yeah. So, why are we doing this? Well, competition for customers and resources, obviously. And the more a company becomes more globalized or internationalized, the bigger the competition gets. So you have a competition for both customers and for resources. Also, a necessity for more effective and efficient operations, the ability to deal with and respond to change. Also, you want to focus on retaining your competitive advantage. Don't of you, I don't know what kind of companies you work in. Does anybody know what their competitive advantage is in their company?
Yeah.
Can you share it?
For us, in Arabian Access, is the best delivery time, and prices, competitive prices.
Cost leadership?
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Delivery?
Delivery time.
Delivery time,
Short
okay.
delivery time.
So that's your competitive advantage over
The competitor.
your competition.
Yeah. And warranty also
Okay.
that we can provide.
So basically, part of strategy is to retain that or to improve it, okay? Because if you lose your competitive advantage, then you're losing part of your business, or could be, okay? Also, you have to have a time allowance, because when you do a strategy implementation, which I said is the same as a change initiative, you have to give a time allowance for the return on the investment. I mean, you can't implement a strategy and expect to see a miracle right away. It's going to take time. So, you have to give some kind of, excuse me, ROI, as it will take time. And the more complex the strategy, the more time it may take to see the result. I mean, it's just common sense. So the lens, how you view strategic planning, all depends on what department or group you're with. Resources, you look at physical or knowledge-based strengths. Financial people, they look at revenue, costs, and value generation. Anybody, we have any finance people here? Oh, okay. Well, pretty good, diverse group. And I always like to pick on financial people. Unless there's IT people in here, then I pick on them first. Any IT people in here? Oh, good, okay. From an economics lens, you look at economic performance against your industry standards. Human resources, you look at employee assets against organization success. So employees are considered assets of the company. From an HR perspective, it becomes strategic when you start looking at your workforce. And it's the same thing as a strategy. What do we have right now, and what are we going to need in the future as far as skills and abilities, okay? So it becomes, that's the strategic side of HR. Systems, internal, external factors. Technological, you look at competitive advantage of implementation and continuous improvement. Anybody familiar with continuous improvement? It actually comes from the definition from total quality management. Kaizen? Yeah, it's actually, TQM's been around a long time. More longer than Kaizen even. And which is strange because usually those things come and go. Like just in time and all of that. I remember all that stuff when I was in manufacturing, Networks, organizational relationships, supply chains, contacts, industry advisors, continual knowledge, continual organizational development through learning. One of the things we're going to look at, you won't see it here, but you'll see it in the team course. We're going to look at knowledge management. It's kind of strategic. So it's just called the strategic lens, different viewpoints. There are offensive and defensive strategies. And when I say offensive, I don't mean they're offensive. I mean, it's like offense and defense. So for every, every offensive strategy that you come out with, your competitor has to come up with a defensive strategy, okay, to counteract it. So the offensive strategy is intended to increase the market share or leadership position of an organization at the expense of competitors. Defensive strategy is intended to protect the market share position of an organization against the offensive strategic activities of competitors. So it's basically everything is offense and defense. Okay, does that make sense? And you have to remember too, and we'll see this later, not all competitors aren't, at each other's throats. In global society, you'll find some competitors that actually work in harmony with each other to a point. I mean, who are the two biggest electronic competitors, probably, or technological competitors in the world? Probably Apple and Samsung. Yet, as competitive as they are, and they probably work a lot on this offensive, defensive strategy stuff, they also share information. Because Apple uses Samsung touchscreen technology. So as fierce as they are, they realize that, they can also share information. Okay? We'll see that later. We talk about network strategies. There's a couple of gentlemen by the name of Miles and Snow. They come up with types of organizational strategies, different names. The prospector. Now, companies that have a prospector type of strategy are innovative. They seek out new opportunities. They take risks. They grow by encouraging creativity and flexibility. These organizations often are the creators of change and uncertainty to which their competitors must respond. In such an environment, creativity is more important than efficiency. Okay? Now you have to remember, some companies may use several of these strategies, but what we do is we show you we break them out individually. A defender strategy is an attempt to protect their market from new competitors. So they devote primary attention to improving the efficiency of their existing operations. Defenders can be successful, especially when they exist in a declining industry or a stable environment. An analyzer strategy, they attempt to maintain their current business and be somewhat innovative in new businesses. So existing products with efficient operations are maintained for regular customers, while other products are targeted towards new, more dynamic environments. So they do a little bit of both. They meddle in a little bit more creativity, and then they also rely on their go-to standard products. Okay. The reactor has no consistent strategy structure, relationship. This organization takes whatever actions appear to be the most expedient at the time to meet immediate market needs. Sometimes these organizations are innovative, sometimes they attempt to reduce costs, sometimes they do both. So they basically just react to the market, and they have the flexibility to do so. So these are the four standards, but you may find some companies that use combinations of both. Okay? We just kind of break them all out. And I don't believe, this is not in your workbooks. As a matter of fact, this doesn't appear on your final assignment either. Just thought I'd mention that, in case you got nervous. Different levels. The most common strategies we find are corporate, business level or divisional, and the functional level. Global and network level strategies are less common. So if you think of a company like a multinational like General Electric, okay, they have a corporate level, a business level, and a functional level strategy. Okay, do they have a global level? No. Even though they are an international multinational corporation, they don't really have a global structure. Okay, some companies do, some companies don't. But they basically operate, and very successfully, with just a corporate level structure. Okay. And we'll show you that when we go through some.
What is the difference between the corporate level and the global level?
Well, the global level, it typically considers operations. I'm trying to think of a good example. Oh, Unilever. Mm-hmm. Unilever has a global strategy. And their global strategy is they are considered, Unilever never identifies themselves as operating out of a headquarters country. They're truly global. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, where's Unilever's corporate headquarters or global headquarters? They operate globally with a global mindset, but they don't identify themselves in any one country, as opposed to a Siemens. I mean, what country does Siemens identify with?
Actually,
Germany.
Many of the global or I don't know, the international companies, when you search on internet to contact them, you cannot find where the headquarters is.
No.
Some of them there are some contacts and some headquarters. So maybe this is
Because they don't want to be identified with any one country.
So how is the reporting system?
Huh?
The reporting system, the reporting structure.
Well, the reporting system, the corporate level of General Electric basically operates on an international basis. The global level basically operates with more of a one, in other words, they view the entire world as one market, rather than corporate that looks at the different markets around the world. Okay. There really aren't that many global companies, if you really, I mean, with a global strategy. Okay. Unilever is one, Nestle is another. I can't think. Huh?
In German, Henneken.
Is it? I'm not familiar with.
It's Persil and company. This it's like Unilever. It's a company.
Oh, is it? So, and we'll see all these. We'll show all these, because this is more of an introduction to the modules that are coming. So if we look at the three popular levels, corporate, business unit, and functional, a corporate level strategy is basically the broadest strategy level. So at the corporate level, they decide where to compete and what to develop. As an example, and we mentioned General Electric. General Electric basically reviews all of their different divisions every year. Now, years ago, as an example, one of GE's really big money makers for many years was their appliance division. And what did they make in their appliance division? They made television sets, they made washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, all kinds of appliances, hair dryers, and so on and so forth, radios. Do you see any of those products around today? No, they're gone. Why? Because General Electric decided they were no longer going to develop or compete in that market because it became somewhat saturated from Japanese manufacturers. Okay? But where's that decision made? It's made at the corporate level. Okay? Very important. So this is what corporate does. Where are we going to compete? What are we going to develop? So they basically got rid of all their GE appliance divisions. Some of them they sold off. I think Maytag bought a big chunk of it. Kelvinator bought a big chunk. I don't remember who else. But they got rid of it. And they replaced it, more or less, with GE medical products. So they decided to work to explore. At the time, well, now it's GE Medical, but at the time they were looking at imaging equipment. And there were only two competitors in the imaging equipment market. There was Philips and Siemens. So it was a very bold move by them, but it actually was a very successful move. So now their imaging equipment division has actually expanded into a lot of other medical products. I think that was under Jack Welch, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason, in fact, I have a video of Jack Welch, and he was explaining, because they asked him, why'd you get out of the appliance division? Because General Electric television sets were very reliable. And he said their television sets were made in Rochester, New York. The cost of manufacturing a General Electric television set was the exact same price that Panasonic was already selling sets in the United States. So you couldn't compete. So that was one of the reasons they got out of it. At the business unit level or divisional level, they, excuse me, they have to decide how they're going to compete in a specific market. What is their advantage over rivals in chosen market? So if you think of, and I like to use General Electric because they're actually a good model for this class. So if you think of GE, I don't know, let's think of power system, nuclear. I mean, they have so many different divisions. Jet engines, medical, and I think they have plastics yet too.
Oil and gas.
Yes, that's right. They're in oil and gas. You're right. Well, there's a lot. The point is, each of these divisions, okay, they have to decide how they're going to compete against each of their competitors. Corporate does not tell them how to compete. And so basically, this is why they are decentralized. Decentralized simply means corporate pushes the decision-making down to the divisional level. Because if you're very diverse, none of these products relate to each other. I mean, they're totally diverse. So corporate can't come in and say, we're going to have a one-size-fits-all marketing plan. Would that work? No, it'd be a disaster. So each division, business unit level, has to decide how they're going to compete in their own market. Therefore, they have their own marketing plan, they have their own IT, they have their own HR, they have their own sales group, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Okay? Totally independent from corporate. Corporate only sets the direction where we're going to compete and what we're going to develop. Each division has the, if you will, power and authority to decide how they're going to compete in their own market. They do not take any direction from corporate. That is a decentralized organization, as opposed to centralized, where corporate controls everything. Now, if you're a one-product company, centralization works fine. If you're a diverse multi-product company, it doesn't work at all. I mean, can you imagine having one marketing plan? I mean, what if, where they sell jet engines and where they sell their medical products could be totally different parts of the globe. You couldn't have the same marketing plan. But what about a company like Starbucks? How many products does Starbucks have? I mean, in reality. One, coffee. I mean, they make all those dinky sandwiches and donuts, but that's not really, They make coffee. So they can have a centralized control. And for them, since they have to work with standard process, every Frappuccino that's made globally has to be made the exact same way. So the centralization works well for a company like Starbucks, but it wouldn't work well for a company like General Electric. So and we're going to talk about later centralized versus decentralized. But I'm just kind of giving you a preview here. Does this make sense? Just so you understand the relationship between corporate and divisional. Okay? So if it's decentralized, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Tyco, Siemens, whatever the company is, the more diverse the product, the more need for decentralization. Because once a company goes global or international, then decentralization becomes even more important. I mean, you can't operate globally and try to have centralization. It's not going to work well if you have a lot of different products.
But you can take the guidelines from the corporate and do your strategy.
Yeah, they have some guidelines, sure. But, but the responsibility lies with the head of each of these divisions. And typically it might be a VP of operations or a general manager. When I worked for Tyco, I was in near Houston, Texas. And we were this kind of a setup. It's called we'll see it later. We're going to show you organizational charts. It was a matrix structure. So you report to the general manager, but you also have reporting responsibility to the head of HR, VP of HR. Okay. But basically, the general manager of that division is the king. You don't deviate. They control what goes on in that division. Yeah, they take some guidance, but they make a lot of their own decisions. And so it has to be. So the last level is functional level, and that just basically is your HR, your marketing, your sales, your IT, your finance group, and so on. They basically provide resource to this level. So that each division typically has its own functional group, has its own marketing, its own sales, its own HR, its own IT, its own finance, and so on and so forth. Okay? Make sense? Good. We're doing on time. We're okay. So what are the organizational benefits of all of this? Enhanced communication, more dialogue, more participation, deeper, improved communication, other people's views, what the company is doing and planning and why. When you have a good strategic plan, do you keep it a secret from employees or do you communicate it to employees? Depending on the company you work for. I saw it coming that time. there are actually some companies that, when I was doing consulting work, they said, oh, we don't tell our employees what our strategic plan is. That's confidential. Well, what sense does that make? Zero. So all of this really is about greater communication. And when you have better communication, then you have better commitment. And when you have that, then of course the result is an alignment of employees towards business success. So let me give you my diagram. Think of it this way. I don't think the slide is in here, so I have to draw it. You have your strategic plan, and this can be your annual plan, or it can be your 2 to 5 year plan. But typically in your annual plan, first of all, you have the strategic plan is drawn up by typically your strategic planning committee. Is that one person, or should be multiple people? Yeah. When I worked in Abu Dhabi government, they had one strategic manager. And if anything that came through with the word strategy on it, went to that manager. And that manager was responsible for creating strategic planning for Abu Dhabi government. And I kept saying, that's not going to work. You can't have one person in charge of that. So if you look at it from a business point of view, that strategic plan has to be drawn up by a strategic committee, and which is typically the heads of all of your departments. And those might be vice presidents. I don't know, it depends on how your company is structured. Well, what you call C-suite people, your CEO, your CFO, your COO, your CIO, your EIO, all those people. Okay, your C-suite people. Even HR has a C-suite job now. It's CHRO, Chief Human Resource Officer. Too bad that job didn't exist when I was in HR. I would have liked that job. But that's typically your strategic planning committee. Okay? So they draw up the strategic plan. What did I say was the next step? Anybody remember? The first thing you have to do after you have your strategic plan? What do you need? Yeah, but I said, somebody over here said it. KPIs. So you have the plan, then you have to decide what are we going to measure. You know, there's a college in the UK. I can't remember the name of it. I met the guy that does the program. He actually teaches KPI development because you can develop KPIs and they can be the wrong KPIs. So you have to be very careful that the KPIs that you select are going to accurately predict the success of a plan. So it's very easy to pick the wrong KPIs. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah. So strategic plan KPIs. From that, you develop department goals. From that, every manager meets with employees and you develop employee objectives. Now, this is called cascading. Okay? It's also called alignment. You start with your plan and you end with objectives so that every objective that an employee is working on ties back to that strategic plan.
The department's goals should be a successor to the KPIs?
No, the KPIs are just defining what we're going to measure to be sure that our strategy is on track. Okay? But typically, once the KPIs is developed, senior management, it might be the department head or whatever, will establish department goals for each of the departments under their control. So the manager of that department, the line managers, here's your goals for 2019. Your job now, does anybody have line manager status here? You manage people? So your goal now, your job, is to sit down with your employees and communicate what those department goals are. Now, assuming your employees know their job and know their job description and what their responsibilities are, each of your employees should be able to go back to their desk and write 4 to 7 objectives that they will work on this year that will assist your department in meeting those goals. Make sense? So that all your employees are totally aligned with that strategic plan. No employee is working on an objective that doesn't tie back to that strategy. We'll see this later, but this is basically called management by objectives, or MBO. Very popular. Most companies now are using it to a point. Although there are companies now that are getting away from this whole process too. But when we talk about alignment of employees, this is what we're talking about. So there are no independents down here. You don't have employees doing projects that have no strategic purpose. Okay? Even if they're doing a developmental objective, learning some new skills, that still ties back to a strategic purpose. Everybody with me? Okay. Nobody's falling asleep yet, right? I'll wait till about 7 o'clock. I'll put you to sleep yet. So, that's the result. And we'll see this, we'll probably get into this a little bit more later. So, are there companies that ignore strategic planning? Of course. I can't tell you how many I found just in the UAE. I've heard all the excuses. These are some of the excuses. In fact, many of these I've heard already. Oh, we don't do that here. We don't need any strategy here. Why? Well, because we do firefighting. What's firefighting? Anybody know? It's kind of a U.S. term, firefighting. It means you put out the fire when it burns. You don't worry, there's no pre-planning. Something flares up, we just throw a bucket of water on it and put it out. We don't have any plan. It's called firefighting. Some people call it a waste of time. Some companies think it's too costly. My argument is you can't afford not to do it. Laziness. Some companies are content with short-term success. Well, I've been in business now 3 years, and we've been pretty successful without this strategy thing. Yeah, come back and tell me that in maybe 2 more years, see where you are. Fear of failure, overconfidence, prior bad experience, or fear of the unknown. Those are all reasons why companies don't have strategy, okay? And it happens, And I wouldn't, I'm not going to tell you that, well, just because you don't have a strategy means that you're doomed to failure, but your chances of success are greatly reduced. Even the little donut shop needs some kind of a rudimentary strategy of how they're going to compete. If I'm going to open Allen's Donuts in Dammam, who am I going to compete with tomorrow? I got to compete with Dunkin' Donuts and probably Krispy Kreme, right? So I need a strategy. Actually, I think that's in your, we do have that maybe in your workbook. Or your, I think we have it in there somewhere. So, the components, plan change and emergent change. Plan change is premeditated, it's a deliberate course of action. Emergent change is something that is unplanned, it just kind of comes up over a period of time. Both are used in strategic planning. And sometimes emergent change comes from, a lot of times from high performance work teams. High performance work teams are sometimes tasked with actually creating change initiatives, maybe quality changes, process changes, and so on. They call it emergent change. But both are used for strategic planning. So the modern approach, you have plan design, you have emergence, strategies developed by senior management, pushed down through the organization. Emerging change, strategies continually enacted through decisions made by lower levels, like high-performance work teams, and it's actually pushed up into the organization. So they use both. I don't know if that would apply to your organizations. What kind of companies you guys work for? I didn't even ask.
I work for an international American company.
An American company?
We are doing the sprinklers and this irrigation system.
Irrigation systems?
Yep.
Wow. In the desert?
It's become not no more desert here. They are trying
Yeah.
to make some.
No, I understand. Irrigation systems, huh? That's interesting. What's the name of the company?
Rain Bird.
Rainbird? Oh, jeez, I
It's
know.
well known in the States.
Yeah, it's well known because I'm from Arizona, so I know.
They
I
have
know.
water in Arizona.
Yeah, I know Rainbird real well. In fact, I had all Rainbird irrigation products around my house. Plus, I had the timer. Would turn the water on automatically. Yeah, Rainbird.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know they were here. That's amazing. See, it's amazing what you find out sometimes when you talk to people. Anybody else want to volunteer where they work? I'm curious.
I'm working for MMT. This is a Saudi company, public listed, and it's world leading in the technology of the GRP piping. Technology number one.
Really?
Two state-of-the-art technology centers, one in Norway and one here in Hanoi.
Cool. Interesting. Anybody else? The rest of you are unemployed? Oh. Rainbird. Wow.
So if you need help with programming your timer, we are here.
Yeah, huh? That's amazing. Henry Mintzberg. The 5 P's of strategy. Plan, ploy, pattern, position, and perspective. So plan is a consciously intended course of action. Your ploy, ploy is a word they use to trick people. Specific maneuvers to outsmart your opponents. Pattern, what worked in the past can work in the future, according to Mintzberg. Position, environmental fit, and relationship with other organizations, and perspective is influence of culture and collective thinking on organizational strategy. So that's Henry Mintzberg. I don't think that's in your, no, it's not. It's not in your workbook. So by understanding each P, a robust business strategy that takes full advantage of organization strengths and capabilities can be developed. And scenario planning and implementation. You guys do scenario planning at all? It's kind of like Plan B, what if scenarios. The process of identifying one or more likely major environmental changes against which to test the organization's ability to respond. So factors to consider: identifying time frame, describing alternative futures that fit into the time frame, identifying risks and benefits associated with each possible scenario. So when you're building strategy planning, you may want to have several different alternatives, or what we call Plan B, okay, if something else doesn't work out. The advantages of implementation: you generate more creative and plausible strategies, help with exploration of ideas, build consensus around options, create a realistic picture of potential future events that is understood by more people. Now we just call it scenario planning. Okay. In human, nobody, we don't have any HR people in here, huh? Gee. See, in HR, we do a lot of scenario planning. It's called what if scenarios. Okay, if I make a decision to fire this person, I have to look at all of the different scenarios that could come out of it. Like they might sue us, he might come back and shoot me. There's all kinds of different things you have to consider. You laugh, but that actually happened to me. So they didn't shoot me, but they did come back with a gun. So it's called scenario planning.
But these things, the scenario planning, you should consider in the strategic plan.
Yeah, it's just, see, when you're building the plan, you're sitting around the table with your strategic committee, you come up with a number of different scenarios to find out, what's the best fit. And because they say you want to work towards consensus. What is consensus? Consensus is when everyone agrees. So the more options on the table, the more likely you are to reach consensus. That's what they're saying. You come up with more alternative plans. Okay. But they call it scenario planning. Here we go. Not confuse you now. Mission. A shorter term version of the vision incorporating the values and expectations of the major stakeholders and contemporary environmental factors. So the mission should clearly show why the organization exists, its main activities, and its future position within the industry. The mission should also reflect the key values and ethical positions of the organization. So a mission statement answers the question, where are we now? Typically, a mission statement is much longer than the vision statement. A vision statement might just be one sentence. So, if you want to write the ideal mission statement, these are some of the things you should have in there. Define what the organization is. Define what the organization aspires to be. Limited to exclude some ventures. Broad enough to allow for creative growth. Distinguish the firm from all others. Serve as a framework to evaluate current activities. State clearly so that is understood by all. As a matter of fact, I'm supposed to go to Sudan. There's a big food company in Khartoum. They need help building their mission, vision, and value statements.
Dal Group.
Huh?
It's called Dal Group. D-A-L, Dal Group.
Oh, Dal. And they want them to make the Coca-Cola there and the water. And I don't know if it's Dal. They didn't, the training organization, they didn't tell me who it is. It might be Dal. Yeah. So they but I told them, you know, I really, building a mission and vision and a value statement has to come from management, not from a consultant. But apparently they need some guidelines. Oh, that'd be great if it's Dal Group. I wouldn't mind that. I've been to Sudan many times, so I usually go. Are you from Sudan? Yes. Oh, well, there you are. I'm usually there 2 or 3 times a year. But it's getting more and more difficult now because conditions are just. I'll go in March and then I'll go in July, and the deterioration is so visible. It's really so. I don't know. I haven't been there since last July because I was supposed to go and I canceled it. But yeah, it's kind of a messy situation, and the people there are so hungry to learn. It's unbelievable. They're actually a hunger for learning. So, examples of mission statements. How about Starbucks? To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Isn't that lovely? That's their mission statement. Everybody knows IKEA? Do they have IKEA here? Yes. That's a store I really miss in the Philippines, IKEA. I always like going to IKEA. To create a better everyday life for many people, our business idea supports this vision by offering a wide range of well-designed functional home furnishing products at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. Well, I would dispute that. Their prices ain't so low. And plus you got to put it together yourself. Devon Energy is a result-oriented oil and gas company that builds value for its shareholders through its employees by creating an atmosphere of optimism, teamwork, creativity, resourcefulness, and by dealing with everyone in an open and ethical manner. That's a pretty good mission statement, actually. I kind of like that. CAT. Everybody knows CAT? Our mission is to enable economic growth through infrastructure and energy development and to provide solutions that support communities and protect the planet. In fact, I think they have a whole clothing line now too, don't they? CAT, besides heavy equipment.
Do we have, I was about to ask, do we have another statement for the shoes industry, clothes, and the bag, luggage?
Yeah, I don't know if they do. That's a good question. I don't know.
Other brands other than,
Yeah, because they may. That may be a separate mission statement. I'd have to look it up. I don't know. So vision is the desired long-term future state of the organization, often used to inspire and motivate employees with hopes of a lofty and successful future. It is a philosophical goal of what an organization would like to achieve or accomplish in the midterm or long-term future. It is intended to serve as a clear guide for choosing current and future courses of action. So, a vision statement answers the question, where do we want to go? Or where do we want to go? So, some examples. Harley Davidson. Their vision statement is to fulfill dreams through the experiences of motorcycling. Not much. Though vision statements are usually very short. Amazon. Our vision is to be Earth's most most customer-centric company, to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online, and to use drones to deliver your products. Microsoft. Empower people through great software, anytime, any place, and on any device. You ever wonder how long it took them to write these? I wonder how much time they put into. Probably a lot. I mean, not that they look very complex. Nike. To bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. I love this. If you have a body, you are an athlete. I don't think so. I have a body, but not at my age. I'm not an athlete anymore. Tesla. To accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Although they haven't been very successful. So those are examples of vision statements.
In Rainbird, we have only one small sentence. The intelligence use of water.
Intelligent use of water.
Water.
I like that. See, yeah, very simple. Yeah. Yeah, there's an eye clinic in South Carolina. It's pretty big. It's called Stokes Eye Clinic, and they have the best vision I've ever seen. You can go. It's like a chain of stores. You can buy eyeglasses, contact lenses, and it says Stokes Eye Clinic. Our vision is to always take care of your vision. Clever, very clever. I like that water thing. That's pretty good. So, how about values? Do we need values to develop strategy? Actually, yes. It's an important factor. Values are the operating philosophies or principles that guide an organization's internal conduct, as well as its relationship with customers, partners, and shareholders. So a value statement is a brief description of the stakeholders and the behaviors that the organization considers to be most important. Organizations now include corporate social responsibility in their value statements. Anybody involved in corporate social responsibility? Anybody know what it is? Yeah. In the other school, they used to offer a course in corporate social responsibility, I remember. But it's becoming part of companies' value statements now. And yes, we have examples. This is Aptos Bioscience. Our core values: be remarkable, be empathetic, be candid, take ownership, be curious, be introspective, be uncomfortable, and execution matters. Why would they want you to be uncomfortable? Isn't that odd? Be uncomfortable. You got to think. You got to really put your thinking hat on to figure that one out, as it applies to employees particularly.
Maybe to think out the box.
Yeah, not to be complacent. Exactly. Don't ever be so comfortable in your job that you stop thinking. Okay? It's kind of different, though. That's why I picked that one. I just thought it was kind of different. What's this one? Oh, Prudential Insurance. How we conduct our business is just as important as what we do. Our core values are the principles that guide us daily in helping our customers achieve financial prosperity and peace of mind, At all times, we strive to distinguish Prudential as an admired multinational financial service leader, trusted brand that is differentiated by top talent and innovative solutions for all stages of life. So, their values are worthy of trust. We keep our promises and are committed to doing business the right way. Customer focus. We provide quality products and services that meet our customers' needs. Respect for each other. We are inclusive and collaborative. Individuals with diverse backgrounds and talents can contribute and grow. And winning with integrity. We are passionate about becoming the unrivaled industry leader by achieving superior results for our customers, shareholders, and communities. Prudential Insurance. And years ago, Prudential Insurance used to just be a straight life insurance company. Now there are all kinds of financial investments and so on. They've really grown over the years. It's a pretty big organization. So we talked about stakeholders. Who are they? Are employees stakeholders? First of all, what's the definition of a stakeholder? Stakeholder is a very short definition. Any person or group that is impacted by what a company does. Any person or group that is impacted by what a company does. So if you think of it that way, shareholders is a pretty broad base of people. So yes, employees are certainly impacted by what a company does. Customers are certainly impacted by what a business does. Suppliers, creditors. If your company is borrowing money to expand, the bank, they're certainly going to be impacted by what you do or don't do, particularly if you don't start paying your loan back. Or you don't have this here. Unions. Anybody familiar with unions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? From where? Yeah, unions basically are employee groups, okay? Employees join unions, and the union represents the employees, and then the management has to negotiate a contract with the union, not with the employees, but with the union. So the union is basically like a third party. Are unions good? Well, it depends on what side of the table you're on, okay? Unions served a very big purpose. The oldest unions are in Europe, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal. They used to be called guilds in the olden days. They're probably several hundred years old. But they have a great deal of power in Europe, probably too much power now. In the United States, the unions came in after the turn of the century, and a necessity because employers were really taking advantage of their employees. They didn't pay them overtime. They didn't pay them a minimum wage. They didn't pay them compensation if they were injured. If you got injured years ago at work, you got fired. Okay? So unions were good at that particular time because they brought in a lot of legislation for the protection of employees, minimum wage, overtime regulations, and so on and so forth. The problem is, of course, they became, again, so powerful, kind of the pendulum started swinging too far the other way.
Like syndicates?
Huh?
Less like syndicates or the unions?
Yeah.
They are like syndicates or
Oh, you mean like organized crime? Yeah, well, they did get involved in organized crime. That was one of the problems. Yeah, I mean, the biggest case of that was a guy by the name of Jimmy Hoffa, who was head of the Teamsters Union. He was in bed with the mafia at that time.
The unions become nowadays like associations, engineering association, labor association. So
Yeah, depending on what country you're in, because many countries have anti-union laws, most of them in the Middle East. They will allow you to join an association, but they don't let you join a union. Their unions are pretty much forbidden. I think they have one union in Bahrain, if I'm not mistaken. But here in UAE, you're not going to find them for a variety of, for a variety of reasons. Okay, but I mean, the problem is unions originally they start off with a very noble, a very noble purpose. But the problem is they start to get too powerful to the point where companies actually start losing control of their own organizations. I mean, if you look at the three big automakers in the United States, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, all of them were unionized by the same union, United Auto Workers. And they basically decimated the auto industry because of their demands. So, and ultimately, who gets hurt the most is the union employees. Because when they put so many, so many demands on the automakers, and the automakers start shutting down plants. So now the union workers are out of work. But anyway, they are impacted, of course, by what a company does, so therefore they are a stakeholder. How about the local community? How are they impacted by what a company does? Yeah, well, they employ people in the local community. They may make charitable donations in the local community.
Taxes.
And they pay taxes in the local community. They may pollute in the local community, air, water, and ground. So they are stakeholders. Government agencies, of course, occupational safety and health, and so on. I mean, even in Middle East countries, you have, Ministry of Labor. Okay, it's kind of a relationship between Ministry of Labor and organizations. Are they impacted by what a company does? Yes, and then you get impacted by what they do back to you. So you don't want to mess with the Department of Labor, or in this country it would be Ministry of Labor, because they can fine you. They can make your life miserable. And of course, owners are stakeholders. Now, if you're a big company and you're traded publicly, then your owners would be stockholders or shareholders. So a shareholder is also a stakeholder. Yeah.
What about the families, the employees' families? Were they considered as stakeholders?
Well, as a branch of employees, maybe. I mean, not in the typical sense. I guess they would lump them under employees. I mean, if an employee loses a job, yeah, the family suffers too. But ultimately, that would be an extension of the employees. But these are pretty much the main stakeholders you would have to worry about when we talk about stakeholders, so you know who they are. So every stakeholder, of course, has certain expectations. If you're an owner or a shareholder, you want to see growth in earnings. You want to see a return on your investment. If you're a staff member or employee, you're looking for pay and fringe benefits, satisfaction with working conditions. A customer is looking for satisfaction with price, quality, and service. A supplier is looking for satisfaction with payments, future sales potential. Suppliers always kind of take it on the chin with big companies. Big companies really torture their suppliers in many cases. Okay, not always, but I'm just saying. By late payments and so on. It's one of the reasons, in fact, I got out of consulting work years ago, because I couldn't get paid. Particularly if you're working for government, they make you wait and wait and wait. When you're an independent, and you bill like maybe for a week's worth of training, and you're sitting there 6 months later and you haven't been paid, you can't survive very long. And what I always used to enjoy was, what pushed me over the top? At a government agency, make me wait 6 months. I went down to their office. I said, hey, how long do I have to wait? I said, well, if you give, and I gave them a discount in the beginning. If you give us an additional 20% discount, we'll pay you today. Well, then that's 40%. So we have a tendency to torture suppliers sometimes. Creditors. Obviously, their expectation is your ability to pay your debt. Unions are looking to bargain fairly with companies. Local community officials are looking for involvement of organizations member in local affairs, lack of damage to the community's environment. And government agencies want you to comply with laws. And do government agencies want you to avoid penalties and reprimands? I mean, think about it. Do they really? No. In the United States, you had the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which was part of the Department of Labor. They used to come around periodically and do inspections. And I mean, every little thing they find is a fine. Every fine they collect goes back to them. It's how they support themselves. So do they really want you to avoid penalties?
No, they want to pay for them.
But it's not common in all countries.
No, I know. I'm just being cynical because this is the way you get after 40 years in business. You become very cynical about it. I mean, when I have an OSHA inspector comes in, before he even gets out into the manufacturing plant, he walks through the office, unplugs the coffee machine to make sure it has a 3-prong grounded plug. You know you're going to be in for a long day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, speaking of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, they even count how many toilets you have versus how many employees you have. I mean, there's all rules for this stuff. So, yeah. So, but no, I know it's not like that in all countries. So, those are expectations. Strategic goals and objectives. And most of these we already kind of touched on. So strategic goals, what in an organization its people must do to fulfill their mission. Long-term objectives are specific results that an organization seeks to achieve within 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 years. Short-term objectives are milestones that must be met within a 6 to 12 month period to achieve the long-term objectives. Action plans are the detailed steps at the functional level that are required to meet short-term strategic objectives. Resource allocation, of course, we talked about, the financial, physical, human, and technological resources needed to achieve objectives. That's just kind of a general overview. Cascading, oh, I do have it in here, so So you have vision. I mean, when you really think about it, if you follow this theory, you really can't have a strategy unless you have mission and vision, or at least vision. You really can't. You need at least a vision. So you have vision, mission and values, strategies and long-term strategic objectives, and then, of course, you have annual goals, departmental goals, and the last one, as I mentioned earlier, individual goals or employee objectives. Okay? That's kind of the way it works. So, strategic goals and value creation. How do you create value? A way of defining the outputs of an organization which is broader than profitability and considers all forms of contribution to the environment in which it operates. I used to have a general manager when I worked for Tyco. Oh God, I can hear every day. We gotta create value. We gotta create more value. I can hear he's a little guy. He had this squeaky voice. We gotta create more value out here. We used to make valves. In fact, one of our biggest clients in those days was Saudi Aramco. So value creation has different meanings to different stakeholders. Some examples. Shareholders consider share price and dividends creating value, if you're on the receiving end. Customers' idea of value creation is price, quality, customer service, and innovation. The community is looking for employment opportunity, charity, taxes, and goodwill. That's creating value. Look what happened with Amazon just recently. They were going to build their second, Amazon 2, their headquarters in New York. How many? 25,000 jobs? And they said the average job would pay between $100,000 and $150,000 a year.
This is the value.
Huh?
This is
That's
the value.
real. That's creating value. And the tax base that would create. I mean, this is something, New York, of course, I mean, the worst state is California, but New York is probably running a close second because of all of their social welfare programs. This is something they really needed, was this tax base.
Why they weren't that much happy?
There were a few non-contents. Actually, I'll tell you who they were. They were what they call there's a new movement now in the United States within the Democratic Party. It's called the Democrat Socialist Group. And it was the socialist part of the party that really started bad-mouthing Amazon. And they were mad because Amazon was going to get a tax break to build this place. But the tax break was going to come after they had paid their first 5 years of taxes. So they didn't understand it. So they started really bad-mouthing Amazon, and Amazon just said, we'll go somewhere else. So the community really lost out on that one. I think it's kind of funny. Oh, I could go into that. That was a... And they blamed one person for that. This new congresswoman called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a socialist. And she was very qualified to become a congresswoman. You know what she did before she got elected last November? She was a bartender. An excellent background to be a congressman. She was instrumental in getting this thing killed. So now she's like, everybody's out to get her. It's kind of funny. The public sector, they're looking for transparency, efficient use of funds, and services. So, anybody ever hear of SMART goals? We do it when we think of performance management. Well, you also do it when you're establishing objectives in a strategic manner. Use the SMART philosophy. So what do we mean by a SMART objective? SMART is an acronym that is used to guide the development of measurable goals. Each objective should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And if you've ever done performance management, you probably already know that. So, specific. So when you're doing goals or objectives, specific answers the question, what is to be done, how will you know it is done, and describe the results or end product of the work to be done. Measurable answers the question, how will you know it meets expectations, and defines the objective using accessible terms, quantity, quality, frequency, cost, deadlines. So the measurable part of a SMART goal is basically kind of like the KPI. What are we measuring? What's the metric? Obviously, goals have to be achievable. So can the person do it? Can the measurable objective be achieved by the person? Relevant. Should it be done? Why and what will be the impact? And time-oriented or time-bound answers the question, when will it be done? It refers to the fact that an objective has an endpoint and checkpoints built into it. So, some of the benefits of strategic planning. There are financial and non-financials. Research indicates organizations using strategic management concepts are more profitable and successful than those that do not. Firms with planning systems more closely resembling strategic management theory generally exhibit superior long-term financial performance relative to their industry. The non-financial, besides helping firms avoid financial demise, strategic management offers other tangible benefits such as enhanced awareness of external threats, an improved understanding of competitors' strengths, increased employee productivity, reduced resistance to change, very important there, and a clearer understanding of performance reward relationships. Now, a lot of companies with this performance reward relationship we see are getting more connected to what we call pay for performance. So you see a lot of jobs now, rather than just straight salary, it's usually like salary plus a bonus potential. Bonus potential is tied to performance. Okay. Also, in addition to empowering managers and employees, strategic management often brings order and discipline to an otherwise struggling company. And strategic decision making. Strategic decisions consider the entire organization and represent a complex aspect of business strategy, business planning. Strategy entails making major changes for the organization, recognizing that the business environment is not static and will continue to evolve. So the goal of making strategic decisions is to implement policy that aims to move the organization toward its long-term goals. Strategy takes into account an organization's resources, threats, and available opportunities. So strategic decisions always represent a risk because these decisions deal with the future. Can we always be sure of what's going to happen in the future? No. So there's always going to be a risk factor. While a company can make strategic decisions based on relevant information, the organization can never predict the future with certainty. Because of this, a business must take precautions when implementing strategic decisions. It's like when you come out with a sales forecast. It's not 100% guaranteed, because there are economic factors, unforeseen economic factors, that could impact that sales forecast. So there are strategic, there are administrative, and there are operational decision making. So strategic decisions are long-term. Administrative decisions typically are done on a daily basis. Operational decisions are not frequently taken. Strategic decisions are considered where the future planning is concerned. Administrative are short-term based decisions, and operational are typically medium period based decisions. Strategic decisions are taken in accordance with organization mission and vision. Administrative are taken according to strategic and operational decision making. And operational, these are taken in accordance with strategic and administrative decisions. Strategic decisions are related to overall counter planning of the organization. Administrative decisions are related to working of employees in an organization. And operational decisions basically are related to production. Strategic deal with organization growth. Administration are in welfare of employees working in an organization. Operational are related to production and factory growth. Okay. So just kind of breaking the three different types out. Is that the last slide? No, not yet. So, 3 characteristics of strategic decision making. Watching my time here. They are rare. Strategic decisions are unusual and typically have no precedent to follow. They can be consequential. They commit substantial resources and demand a great deal of commitment from people at all levels, or they can be directive. They set precedents for lesser decisions and future actions. Strategic decision making, you evaluate your current performance results, review your corporate governance, because ethics comes in, scan and assess the external environment, and we're going to do that. We're going to scan and assess external environment later when we talk about the pestle analysis. Scan and assess the internal corporate environment. Analyze your strategic factors using the SWOT. And generate, evaluate, and select the best alternative. Implement selected strategies. And evaluate implemented strategies. That's basically the process. That's the end of that chapter.
Hi, my name is Erica Olson with M3 Planning. Today's topic is about what is strategic planning really? You know, strategic planning means different things to different people, and we have found that if we're not really clear about what we mean by strategic planning for an organization up front before we get started, we tend to have some problems getting people engaged in the middle of the process, or there's just roadblocks or people's resistance gets in the way. So here are the different types of things we mean when we talk about strategic planning, and there are different outcomes most of the time that leaders are seeking when they're engaging in a strategic planning process. These build, so let's talk about them sequentially, and then you can think as we're moving through what you're really looking for in your strategic planning process. So at the very base level, a strategic planning process is an articulated plan. People want an articulated plan for their organization. So what do I mean by that? That means we have a mission, we have a vision, we have goals, objectives, etc. An articulated plan. Sometimes we want to add on to that plan is actually strategic. And you may say, well, it's a strategic plan, but that's not necessarily true unless you bring in external data. If you don't bring in external market data, such as what your customers think, what your competitors are doing, what's happening in your environment, in your industry, you're not going to have a strategic plan. You're just going to have a plan. Now, sometimes we don't need a strategic plan. Sometimes we just need an articulated set of mission, vision, goals, objectives. But sometimes we really need to figure out what our strategic differentiation is in the marketplace. And in which case, to do so, you need to add into your process that market data collection, use it to make strategic decisions about what you're doing and not doing, such your plan actually articulates how you're different. Okay, so a plan that's strategic that also drives organizational engagement. How do we drive organizational engagement? We cascade goals. And cascaded goals mean that everybody in the organization knows what their piece of the strategy and the plan are. That drives organizational engagement. And you may say, well, of course I want everybody engaged. And sometimes we want that in organizations, but we don't have the wherewithal to actually make that happen. And sometimes that's not necessary right now. So it's important to know if your strategic planning process is intended to drive organizational engagement or not. And if it is, you need to make sure that your plan goes all the way down to the individual level so everybody knows their piece of the future. So sometimes we add on to that the want to actually drive organizational transformation using a strategic planning process. And how do we do that? We have an articulated plan that's strategic, that's cascaded through the whole organization, that we talk about on a regular basis and we make changes to as we move along the way, and we help shift behaviors and we help drive choice. And we do that by visibly talking about it in specific meetings. I'm calling quarterly business reviews. You may call them something else. But the point is we're using this information to drive decision making and drive behavior, and we're talking about it and we're being visible about it. So as you're thinking about your strategic planning process, think about what's important to your organization right now and get everybody on the same page about what the real outcome of your process is intended to be. Hi, my name is Erica Olson with M3 Planning. Today I'm going to provide you an overview of the strategic planning process. And instead of going through a long, boring list of definitions, we're going to do it with an illustration. So let's get started. We always start with our mission statement, and I have this illustrated as a box because a good mission statement helps clarify what's in and what's out, and most importantly, answers the question why we exist as an organization. Once you've answered that, you then jump to determining where you are now. And we figure out where we are now by looking at data, both externally and internally. What's going on in your industry, in your environment, with your competitors, with your customers? What is your staff saying about what's working and what's not working? What are your partners saying about what they like or what they don't like? And we collect all that information and we synthesize it into our handy little strategic thinking tool called a SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Once we have that identified, we use that information as well as our collective thinking to determine where we want to be in the future. Now, you may already have a vision, and that vision may just to be updated based on the market information that you just collected, and maybe you're refreshing it. But what's important about the vision is it answers the question where are we going, and it's really clear to everybody in the organization. Because if it's not clear, you can't create a plan from where we are today to where we want to be in the future. So once you've clarified your vision, your job in your planning process is to draw the most direct line or the clearest path from where we are today to where we want to be. And we start by articulating our organization-wide strategies, or those things that are our guardrails to keep us on a straight path. Once we have those identified, we then articulate our long-term strategic objectives. Now, there are all kinds of different planning terms. I'm going to call these long-term strategic objectives to articulate those things that provide a high-level view of items between where we are today and that future state, broken down in a balanced way: financial, customer, operational excellence, and people. Less than 7 of these is always good. Once we have clear long-term strategic objectives, we then identify our short-term goals. I'm defining goals using our acronym SMART: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. It's fabulous to have articulated goals that go out multiple years. You can't always do that, but if you can in your planning process, that helps you have a longer-term horizon. So you have goals that are with milestones that are due in year 1, year 2, year 3. You may even go past that for this purpose, let's just say 3 years. For your first year, or the year current that you're in, you're going to want to break that down into specific goals at the functional or department level, and then at the individual level. So you want to cascade goals, your corporate goals, to departments and then individual contributors. So once you have all of these pieces put together, you have more than likely a really good plan. But no plan is complete if you don't talk about how you're going to execute it. So let's talk about a couple key items. Everybody in your organizational structure needs to have a clear action plan. He or she needs to know their piece of the overall plan and what they're responsible for the year or for the quarter. You need to identify when you're going to come together to talk about your strategy and make adjustments and adaptations. Perhaps you'll have quarterly strategy reviews, and these might be the months that you might have them. Don't leave your offsite without identifying those dates. Recommend that. Pick a system to track your progress. So when you come into these meetings with your goals, everybody has the same documentation and language to talk about how you're doing against your plan. And with that, that's your complete strategic planning process.
So I just kind of highlight what we talked about in Module 1. Okay? Make sense for everybody?